Okay, so you sent over a whole stack of research on this Stephen Smith case.
Yeah,
And wow, this is it's a lot to unpack.
it is.
A 19-year-old nursing student found dead on a rural South Carolina road in 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Initially ruled a hit and run, but
Mm-hmm.
there are so many strange details, and you have all these rumors swirling about the Murdaugh family. I mean,
Right.
it's
It's fascinating.
a real head scratcher, and I'm so ready to dive into this with you.
It's a case that draws you in, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And one of the things that makes it so compelling is that it really remained under the radar for years.
Right.
It took another tragedy, the murders of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh,
Uh-huh.
to really shine a spotlight on the inconsistencies in the original investigation.
Yeah, it's almost like that case cracked open a Pandora's box of questions.
Definitely.
But let's
Yeah.
start at the beginning.
Okay.
Who was Stephen Smith? I mean, he was
Yeah.
more than just a name in a case file,
Yeah.
right?
Absolutely. Stephen was a young man with dreams, aspirations. He had that fighting spirit from the very start.
Yeah.
You know, born prematurely, weighing only a little over 2 pounds.
Wow.
His mother, Sandy Smith, she even said she thought it was goodbye when she first held him.
Oh, wow.
But Stephen defied the odds.
You know that detail about his premature birth? It really struck me when I was reading about this case.
Yeah.
It speaks to his resilience,
Right.
his determination. This wasn't someone who gave up easily.
Mm-hmm.
So to think of his life cut short like this, it's just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And then to have the initial investigation be so full of holes, it adds another layer of tragedy, wouldn't you say?
I agree. And when you look at the initial investigation,
Right.
it's hard not to be troubled by the way the cause of death changed
Mhm.
from a shooting to a hit and run,
Right.
especially when so much of the evidence didn't seem to support that conclusion.
Right. Like there was no car debris, no broken headlights,
Right.
no paint scrapes on Stephen's body. Things you typically expect to see in a hit and run.
Exactly. And let's not forget about those shoes.
Issues.
Stephen's shoes were still on his feet, loosely tied.
Uh-huh.
Now think about the kind of impact that would cause the massive skull fracture that Stephen suffered.
Right.
It's highly unusual for someone's shoes to stay on in a hit and run,
Yeah.
especially one that violent.
You're right.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that when I was first reading about this. But yeah, those shoes,
Big red flag.
that's a huge red flag.
Yeah.
And then you have Stephen's car found miles away, doors locked,
Right.
gas cap open.
Uh-huh.
It's almost too perfect, like something out of a movie.
It's like it was staged.
Staged, yeah. And of course, we can't avoid talking about
Right.
the elephant in the room here.
Yes.
All the whispers and rumors connecting this to the Murdaugh family.
Yeah, this is where things get a little tricky.
Yeah.
And we need to remember that rumors are not facts. But you can't ignore how often the Murdaugh name pops up in these case files.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the details are just, they raise eyebrows.
I do.
Like Randy Murdaugh, Alex Murdaugh's brother,
Uh-huh.
called Stephen's father, offering to help pro bono
Right.
almost immediately after learning about Stephen's death.
Right.
And later, he was seen at the scene with Alex Murdaugh,
Yeah.
even though the family claimed that they weren't involved in the investigation.
Yeah, and there was also that tip that investigators received
Right.
implicating 2 other individuals, but they were never even interviewed.
Right, yeah, it just makes you feel like something isn't adding up.
Something's not right. Yeah.
But it is important to emphasize that, as of today,
Right.
there is no direct evidence linking the Murdaughs to Stephen's death.
Right. Yeah, it's important to make that distinction.
Yeah, I think what's important here is that we acknowledge
Mm-hmm.
the questions raised by these connections
Yeah.
and the lack of a thorough investigation into those connections. We can't just sweep them under the rug,
Right.
but at the same time, we have to avoid jumping to conclusions.
Right. We need to let the investigation unfold.
Exactly.
And speaking of letting things unfold,
Mm.
we can't forget about Sandy Smith, Stephen's mother.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, she has been a force to be reckoned with in all of this.
Oh, she has been relentless. Think about it.
Yeah.
Fighting for answers for almost a decade.
Yeah.
Roadblocks, dead ends,
Yeah.
but she never gave up.
It's that mother's love,
It is.
the kind that won't quit.
Absolutely.
And she launched letter writing campaigns.
Yeah.
She pushed to get the FBI to unlock Stephen's phone.
Mm.
I mean, this woman was convinced there was information on that phone
Right.
that someone didn't want revealed.
Yeah.
And you know what? She was right.
She was. And that's what's so remarkable about Sandy Smith.
Yeah.
Her persistence ultimately helped bring renewed attention to this case.
No.
Remember, it was after the murders of Paul and Maggie Murdaugh that SLED finally took over the investigation and, crucially, declared Stephen's death a homicide.
Wow. So it really took another tragedy to get this case moving in the right direction.
It seems that way.
It's almost as if the world finally started paying attention to what was happening in Hampton County.
Right, and this is where things start to get really interesting.
Okay.
The exhumation of Stephen's body brought even more shocking revelations thanks to the work of Dr. Michelle Dupree.
Okay, so before we jump into that,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure our listeners understand how important Dr. Dupree's findings were.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this wasn't just some routine examination, right?
Not at all. Her findings were key in debunking some of the earlier theories about Stephen's death.
Mm-hmm.
First, she confirmed that a single blow to the head was the cause of death.
Okay.
So this debunked the theory that Stephen was beaten with a baseball bat,
Right.
which had been a rumor going around.
Okay, so no signs of a struggle, no defensive wounds.
Exactly, and here's another crucial detail. Dr. Dupree did not believe that Stephen's body was moved to the location where he was found.
Wait, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Now, this is where my brain starts to hurt a little bit.
Okay.
So we've got a fatal blow to the head,
Huh?
likely from a moving vehicle, but no signs of a typical hit and run.
Right.
What are we supposed to make of that?
I know, it's a puzzle, and even crime scene expert Kenny Kinsey, who testified in the Murdaugh murder trial,
Right.
weighed in on this.
Mm-hmm.
He believes Stephen was hit by a vehicle at high speed, but the lack of debris at the scene,
Right.
that's what's baffling.
Yeah.
Kinsey theorized that Stephen might have been walking along the road, trying to flag down help after his car broke down.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these pieces might fit together.
Yeah.
But there's still so many gaps.
Mm-hmm.
Where do we go from here? What happened next in the investigation?
Well, with all these new developments, the investigation gained serious momentum. So, as we stand now, a grand jury has been convened, subpoenas are flying, and SLED has zeroed in on a small group of individuals they believe have information about Stephen's death.
Wow.
Now, we don't know their identities yet,
Right.
but it feels like we're getting closer to some answers.
It's been almost a decade, but it sounds like things are finally starting to move in the right direction.
Yeah.
It's a long time coming for Sandy Smith, who has fought so tirelessly for her son.
She has.
I mean, she's incredible.
She is. She really is. And, you know, you have to remember that this was all happening against the backdrop of the Murdaugh family's influence in Hampton County.
Right.
It wasn't just about finding answers for Sandy. It was about challenging a system that, for many, felt rigged against her.
It's true. The Murdaugh family's legacy,
Yeah.
their power in the legal system, law enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
it casts such a long shadow over this whole case.
It did.
Even if they weren't directly involved with Stephen's death, their presence added another layer of complexity. And let's be honest, a level of intimidation
Oh, for sure.
for anyone seeking justice.
Absolutely.
It's like something out of a Southern Gothic novel, isn't it?
It is.
You have this small town with secrets, a powerful family,
Mm-hmm.
and then someone like Sandy,
Yeah.
an outsider struggling to be heard,
Right.
and then boom, the whole Murdaugh saga explodes,
Right.
and suddenly everyone is looking at Hampton County.
Yeah, it's bizarre how the very tragedy that brought so much pain to another family
Right.
ended up giving Stephen's case new life.
Yeah, it's almost as if the walls started closing in on the whole situation,
Right.
and those whispers about a cover-up
Yeah.
became impossible to ignore.
They did.
Do you think that's what it was? That the Murdaugh downfall helped bring things to light?
It's hard to say for certain, but it definitely seems like a turning point in the case.
Yeah.
It's like those cracks that were always there suddenly became impossible to ignore.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of overlooked details,
Yep.
let's revisit that highway patrol investigator who clearly stated he didn't believe this was a hit and run.
Right.
He even labeled it a murder, but it seems his concerns were disregarded.
That's what is so frustrating about this case. There were red flags right from the start. Experienced law enforcement professionals raising concerns.
Yeah.
But the investigation just seemed to stall.
Right.
Was it the Murdaugh connection? Was it incompetence?
Yeah.
Or was it some even more sinister?
Yeah.
I mean, those are the questions that keep me up at night.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think happened there?
It's impossible to know for sure without being inside that investigation.
Right.
But it does raise serious questions about how thoroughly those initial leads were pursued.
Yeah.
And let's not forget about Stephen's phone. The phone. Sandy fought tooth and nail to get the FBI to unlock it, and they eventually did.
Yeah.
But the details of what was found on that phone have remained pretty much a mystery.
That's a good point. That phone data could be a huge piece of this puzzle.
Oh, absolutely.
What was Stephen communicating in the days leading up to his death?
Right.
Who was he in contact with?
Exactly.
I mean, there could be messages or location data
Mm-hmm.
that could be crucial to understanding what happened that night.
Absolutely. And think about that cryptic conversation Stephen had with his mother about going deep-sea fishing with someone.
Right.
She'd be surprised to learn about.
Yeah.
Now, was that a casual comment, or was Stephen hinting at something more?
Ooh.
Was he involved with someone who had something to hide?
Right.
These are questions we need answers to.
Yeah, it's like we have all these puzzle pieces scattered around,
Mm-hmm.
but we're still missing the box top,
Right.
the picture that helps us see how it all fits together.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
And remember, some of those pieces might be red herrings, meant to distract us from the real picture,
Right.
while others could hold the key to unlocking the truth.
Yeah, but here's the thing that worries me.
What's that?
Even with this renewed investigation, the grand jury, there's still a chance this case could go unsolved.
That's a sobering thought, but it's a reality for so many families who have lost loved ones under suspicious circumstances.
It's heartbreaking, but you're right, justice isn't always served.
Yeah.
But even if the truth is hard to find, we can't let these stories fade away.
Yeah.
We have to keep asking questions
do.
and demanding accountability
Absolutely.
from those in power.
Agreed.
Okay, so we've talked about the phone data, the Murdaughs,
Yeah.
the stalled investigation. But what about Buster Murdaugh?
Right.
After years of rumors,
Mm-hmm.
he issued a public statement denying any involvement in Stephen's death.
Right.
He even offered an alibi, saying he was at the family's beach house the night Stephen died.
Mm.
Do you think that holds any weight?
Well, it's important to acknowledge that statement and allow the legal process to play out.
Right.
We can't convict someone based solely on public opinion
Right.
or rumors. If SLED has evidence connecting Buster Murdaugh to the crime, they'll present it.
Right. We need to be careful not to get ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we also can't forget that other individuals have been named in connection with this case.
Right.
Those early tips, conflicting accounts, they point to a whole web of relationships
Yeah.
and possible motives that need to be examined.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking about those two people who were named, but never interviewed.
Exactly. This investigation isn't just about a single suspect. It's about understanding the entire context surrounding Stephen's death.
Right.
Who had a reason to want him silenced?
Right.
Who might have had the means and the opportunity to carry out such a crime? I mean, these are complex questions that need thorough investigation.
It's mind-boggling, isn't it?
Yeah.
You start to go down these rabbit holes and you realize just how tangled this web is.
It is.
And what about the possibility that this was, as that initial ruling claimed, a hit and run? Could there be a driver out there, maybe someone who panicked and fled the scene, who holds the key to what really happened?
It's certainly possible, but as we've discussed, the evidence doesn't point to a typical hit and run. The lack of debris, the nature of Stephen's injuries, the position of his body, it all suggests something more deliberate.
Right. It's like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where someone has hidden half the pieces.
Right.
We have these glimpses of a bigger picture.
Yeah.
But we're still missing some crucial information.
We are.
And that's where the grand jury comes in, right?
Right. This is where things could get really interesting.
Okay.
The grand jury has the power to subpoena witnesses, compel testimony, and review evidence that hasn't been made public.
Right.
So they could hear from those individuals that SLED has identified as having information about Stephen's death.
Right.
And maybe finally some of those dark corners of this case will be illuminated.
It sounds promising.
Yeah.
But it also feels like there's a lot riding on this grand jury.
There is.
What do you think the chances are that they'll actually be able to uncover the truth?
It's hard to say, but there is reason to be hopeful.
Yeah.
They have more resources, a wider scope,
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps most importantly, the benefit of hindsight.
Right.
They can look back at the mistakes made in the initial investigation and hopefully avoid repeating them.
It's a lot of pressure, but I'm hoping they'll be able to deliver some answers for Sandy.
Me too.
And for everyone who has been following this case. And, we can't forget the power of public pressure.
Mm-hmm.
The more attention this case receives,
Yeah.
the more difficult it'll be for anyone involved to sweep it under the rug.
You're absolutely right. This isn't just a story to be consumed passively.
Right.
it's a call to action.
What can our listeners do to help keep the pressure on and
Yeah.
make sure that this case isn't forgotten?
Well, they can share Stephen's story. They can talk about it with their friends and family on social media.
Right.
They can contact their representatives
Yeah.
and demand transparency in the investigation. You know,
Yeah.
keep the conversation going.
Keep the conversation going.
Remember, the truth deserves to be heard.
It's incredible how much this case has resonated with people all over.
It is.
Not just in South Carolina, but across the country.
Yeah.
You know, Sandy Smith was actually able to raise over $130,000 through GoFundMe.
Wow.
To fund independent investigations, exhume Stephen's body, and hire experts like Dr. Dupree and Kenny Kinsey.
Right.
I mean, that says a lot about the power of collective action.
It does.
And the belief that everyone deserves justice, no matter who they are or where they come from.
It's true. It's a reminder that even in the face of what seem like impossible odds, a determined individual with the support of a community can make a real difference.
Yeah.
And that's what's so inspiring about Sandy Smith.
Right.
She refused to let her son's memory fade into obscurity. You know, she took on a system that many perceived as untouchable.
It makes you wonder, what would have happened to Stephen's case if the Murdaugh family hadn't imploded?
Right.
Would it have remained a cold case, dismissed as a tragic accident? It's a chilling thought.
It is, and it makes you question how many other cases,
Right.
particularly in small towns and rural communities,
Yeah.
might be languishing in obscurity, victims forgotten, justice denied.
Yeah. It's a sobering reminder that we can't be complacent.
Right.
We have to be vigilant, ask questions, and demand accountability
Absolutely.
from those in power.
We do.
We have to be the voice for those who have been silenced.
We do.
Thinking back on everything we've discussed,
Yeah.
it's incredible how even the smallest details can be so crucial in a case like this.
Right.
You know, remember how we talked about Stephen's shoes?
The shoes, yeah.
The fact that they were still on his feet, loosely tied, that was a major red flag for investigators. It really challenged the whole hit-and-run narrative.
It did.
And pointed towards something more deliberate, something more sinister.
You're right. It's like a detective novel.
Yeah.
Where the author plants these subtle hints, these breadcrumbs, that lead the reader, or in this case, the investigators, down a different path.
Right.
And even years later, those seemingly insignificant details can become crucial pieces of evidence.
Right. It's a good reminder that every piece of information matters.
It does.
A seemingly random tip, a fleeting observation, a forgotten conversation.
Right.
They can all potentially hold the key to unlocking the truth.
It can.
That's why it's so important for people to come forward, even if they think what they know might be insignificant.
Exactly.
And in Stephen's case,
yeah,
there's still that $30,000 reward being offered for information leading to an arrest. You know, maybe someone out there knows something, saw something, or heard something that could help bring closure to this case.
Absolutely.
What would you say to someone who might have information, but is hesitant to come forward?
I would say that even the smallest detail could be the missing piece of the puzzle. You know, it's understandable to be afraid, especially in a case with so much history and powerful figures involved.
Right.
But think about what Sandy Smith has gone through, the years she has spent fighting for answers.
Right.
Your information could be what finally brings her and Stephen the justice they deserve.
That's a powerful message.
It is.
And even if this grand jury doesn't result in an indictment, the exhumation of Stephen's body, the independent investigations, and the renewed attention have brought us closer to the truth than ever before.
Right.
You know, and it feels like we're on the verge of a breakthrough.
I agree. And ultimately, that's what Sandy Smith has been fighting for all these years.
Right.
The truth.
Yeah.
It might not bring her son back. Right.
But it can offer a sense of justice, a sense of peace, in a sense that Stephen's life and his death mattered.
Well said. As we wrap up our deep dive into the mysterious death of Stephen Smith, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. What details resonated with you the most?
Yeah.
What questions are still lingering in your mind?
Right.
This case is a stark reminder that even in a world saturated with information, the truth can remain elusive.
It can.
But with perseverance, determination, and a collective desire for justice, the truth can and will eventually come to light.
It will.
So keep those mental gears turning, Keep asking questions, and most importantly, never stop seeking the truth.
Never.
Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.